Is it confusing and inconsistent, the changes within a matter of days that we've seen when it comes to restrictions in Hong Kong?
I think it also reflects that we need a very humble and flexible policy of this suppress and lift strategy in tackling this very, very difficult pandemic situation. I think, by and large, I think Hong Kong has been trying very hard to contain the epidemic, and so far the case number, double that of in March and April, but still within a sort of a containable number. So far, about 3,000 cases. Slightly over 3,000 cases detected. But I think every day, I think like any government, I think we need to find ways and means to tackle it. And I think there is no quick fix, and there is no magic wand, except that, social distancing, medical care, and also strong compliance by the community. And we have to work with the community at large.
Right, there's no quick fix, which kind of makes a criticism over the reversal that came within just 2 days of the decision to ban the dine-in activities from happening kind of even more curious, right? Do you blame the general public and businesses for being concerned and losing confidence in the policy direction that the government is taking?
Certainly not. I think this is a new experience to every government. But I think, look around the world, there were different places trying out different measures. Some cities, mega cities, they have a complete lockdown or even a curfew. Hong Kong has managed to keep the city running. Well, when you go to banks, when you some of people stay at home to work, some go back to offices. Public transport largely running. But we do need a very vigilant social distancing policy. And in the most recent resurgence of some cases, it has been detected that, some people got contracted from the dining outlets, restaurants. And that's why there is some signs to reducing people's contact in places of eating. Yes, we are struggling because Hong Kong is a highly complex city. People dine out quite frequently, be they breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And therefore, it's a hard decision. And as always, I think any public policy would have to be based on science, which we give tremendous respect to advice given us by the medical expert. But at the same time, I think it has to be acceptable and drawing compliance from the public. I think, every day we are adjusting that, and that's why I said it's quite a humble and flexible experience.
We saw those awful retail sales numbers again from Hong Kong. Of course, you have a very strong reliance on the Chinese mainland shoppers. Is there a need for Hong Kong to diversify, and can it diversify? How would you go about trying to really offset this decline?
Well, actually, if you look at the pie chart of Hong Kong's economic composition, one would have a better understanding that, in addition to mainland tourists, actually Hong Kong's economy composed of essentially trading and logistics, which account for 22%, followed by financial services, almost 19%, and professional services, about another 15%. So these three altogether made up a lion's share, over 60% of our economy. Of course, tourism, retails also come in the fourth and fifth place, contribute a single digit. Now, apparently, at the moment, when there is a travel ban across the world, tourists down to almost zero. Of course, we can't count on visitors to boost our economy. But the internal economy, particularly, as I said, trade remains ongoing and robust. Financial services is ironically robust and vigilant. And that's why I think in the most recently released economic data, in our second quarter, GDP has been down by 9%, which is, of course, is bad. Is a recession that we have not seen for decades. But it basically leveled the first quarter of 9.1%, which compare reasonably with, say, Singapore 12.6%, or the U.S. announced figure yesterday night, which caused a lot of alarm, 32.9%. Now, jobs are suffering. We have currently an unemployment rate of 6.2%. But looking at trade, the second quarter is a bit interesting. It rebounds. Well, the drop has eased from minus 9.7% to minus 2.1%.
Right.
So in a way, that's the situation we are having now.
But those bright spots that you mentioned, Secretary, how long will they last when there is political uncertainty, especially with the arrest now of student activists, with the disqualification of candidates for the elections, and as we continue to see more repercussions coming from international measures against Hong Kong, including the removal of the special trading status for the city?
Yeah, a couple of things. Well, first of all, yeah, we are sort of preparing to the Legislative Council election. It's part of our law to require people to be qualified, and therefore we are doing it according to the existing legislation governing the electoral arrangements. And secondly, I think, yeah, you mentioned about the global tension and focus on Hong Kong arising from the recent U.S.-China tension and also the introduction of our national security law. But time and again, we explain the reason why this piece of legislation is needed in very much the same way as any other jurisdiction, except that we might have a sort of a constitutional vacuum for 23 years after our reunification with our motherland. Now, but when I talk to for instance, international chambers in Hong Kong, of course, well, there will be a lot of question and some worry, well, whether this new law will change the operating environment. But at the same time, a lot of business community leaders were saying that, well, not long ago, like late last year, they were in fact worrying about the street violence, the very damaging sort of disturbances are hurting the economy. Now, with the introduction of the national security law, we are seeing a return of economic and social stability. So I think we are struggling. We are struggling to do a twin battle. Very much like the world is also struggling from a twin battle. In our case, it's trying to restore confidence and understanding, but at the same time fighting this global pandemic. For the world, I think we need to win this twin battle. Without winning the COVID-19 war, I think nothing can be talked about in terms of economic sort of recovery. And I think the whole world will need to recognize that, well, the enemy is in the virus, but not each other's.
How are you going to deal with the economic fallout is what I want to get to, given that you're not only seeing measures against Hong Kong from the U.S., but we're seeing also tech giants now not wanting to have anything to do with data requests from the Hong Kong government. Are you going to end up being more isolated from the world, which really was that connection with the rest of the world that kept Hong Kong special as a financial hub?
First of all, I think our special trading and business status is not something granted by a single trading partner. We are a WTO member. We are a founding and independent member of WTO, and this separate custom territory is given to us by our constitution. Now, of course, with this current sort of global geopolitical tension, there are a group of countries sort of trying to sort of adjust their policy towards Hong Kong, claiming that, well, they do not treat Hong Kong differently from the mainland. But I think devil's in the details. We're also watching that, well, what does it mean by, for instance, U.S. taking away certain sort of trade facilitation, like a licensing exception for some of the dual-use goods. Now, Hong Kong is essentially a financial and trading and navigation center. We are here, the home to thousands or almost 10,000 of overseas companies using Hong Kong as a home base. So I think they would also be seeing this from their own angle, well, whether Hong Kong would still be the very good place, as always, in doing business. I think the financial market speaks for itself. I think facts speak louder than any fear that might be sort of circulating in some small quarters. But essentially, I think since April, we have seen a net inflow of capital, almost $180 billion only in this 2 to 3 months, representing, well, where the money goes. But of course, I think we have a job to do to explain to our sort of interlocutors, as well as the businessmen here in Hong Kong operating. But I think it's also a good advice for major multinational corporation to ask their local representative in Hong Kong what's the actual situation on the ground, how's the business being affected.
Right, so you're telling us that you haven't seen any evidence of capital outflows. In fact, you're seeing capital inflows. What about the talent drain, the brain drain? Have you seen evidence of immigration out of Hong Kong, and is that going to be a concern?
I don't see that really happening. But of course, Hong Kong is a free city that both our local and also overseas people do come and go. In the last 2 decades, we have in fact seen a net inflow of a lot of high-end talent, be they in the professional services, be they in the financial market, be they in the tech industry. Of course, it's a global market, and in fact, Hong Kong compete not by sort of a locking down the boundary or building walls, but actually we have the door torn open, inviting people to come. Now, I think, and particularly for Hong Kong, there where we all along have a free flow of capital, talent, and also a very open and competitive market. I think that will remain diligently the case for Hong Kong, and I think that's the major sort of reason why people keep on coming to Hong Kong.
What further support then will you be providing when it comes to the services and retail industries? Sherry mentioned those horrible retail figures. There's no real kind of catalyst for improvement, right? What do you see as being the further support that the government can give?
Yeah, currently I think the hard-hit sector, as you mentioned, retail, tourism, are being supported through, I think, 3 ways. One, of course, is a direct subsidy given to this sector. We have been sort of providing direct subsidy to company operating, for instance, in the tourism industry, in the retail industry. They are getting a direct subsidy for the trade that they are operating. And secondly, I think there is a very major, robust sort of employment support scheme, which we have rolled out the first phase, dishing out almost 40 billion Hong Kong dollar, and that will come the second phase. Now, essentially, the employment support scheme is there to help companies to keep running and at the same time keeping jobs for their employees. Now, so far, I think that explains why the unemployment rate has been staying within the 6.2 figure, which is at least was not too uncomfortable in our case. But of course, we have to be prepared for the long-run battle. Now, the third front would be helping companies to ease their cash flow. And that's why, in addition to the almost 300 billion economic package, we have about 123 billion Hong Kong dollar loan package, including 100% guarantees loan scheme for SMEs. And in that pocket, we have, in fact, only in the last 3 months, dished out almost half of that money for needy SME. And in that, they are getting this almost very low interest loan to ease their cash flow. But of course, we need to review the situation. And it all depends on not just in Hong Kong, but also how the world is handling the whole epidemic situation.